night, viewers, and welcome to this another program of Advancing the Cause. This program comes to you every Wednesday night from 18:30 hours to 20 hours. The official host of this program is the Honorable Coretta McDonald, AA, MP, and General Secretary of the Guyana Teachers Union. At this stage, let me just tender an apology for Ms. McDonald not being on the program tonight because of matters of national interest. My name is Dennis Jaikran, and I will be hosting the program for tonight. Our topic tonight would be many mistakes. Let me repeat our topic for tonight, many mistakes. As indicated to you in previous programs, these topics are made to be there not because of this program per se, but because of the wide viewership and the persons that are feeding back this program with the necessary and relevant information guiding this program as it relates to the topic for the particular program. And so at this stage, we want to say to our viewers a heartfelt gratitude and thanks for allowing this program into your sitting rooms or wherever you are. And thank you for listening and for the feedback that you would have been given to this program, allowing us not only to formulate the topic, but allowing us to be able to formulate the content based on your submissions, meaning being very reliable information, credible information, so to speak, because in very many cases, this program would seek to verify the information. So the topic again is many mistakes. At a particular time, or maybe two times in this program, I want to quote a very important paragraph. And I'm doing this in the present circumstances of our political situation in this country. Last week, our program would have been The Truth Be Told. And the truth being told means be strong where you are and stand for what you believe in. So this week we are adding to that to say many mistakes. And so when I give our viewers the quote later on, you can see the match between speaking the truth and many mistakes as they relate to the quote. And so tonight, the order of our presentation would be education matters, GTU matters, and some general issues that we would want to discuss. So let us get into the aspect of education matters. This program would always say to you that among the many disorganized ministries in this country, one is the Ministry of Education. Poorly managed, poorly organized, And we would have been pointing out on this program the very many ways in which the Ministry of Education is so poorly organized that the organizational structure as it relates to the minister, the PS, the CEO, and all the officers, including the regional education officers and the officers of the regions, we would have been pointing out that they are a tremendous bunch of failures in this country, failing the education system. And we cannot help saying this over and over because the feedback, not only from Guyana, but from the Caribbean and wider world, US, Canada, England, and other countries, they so allow us to understand that once upon a time, when the coalition was there and then the PNC was there, that the structure of the education system was so in place, so organized and so managed that in very many cases, you could not have found any loophole to say that it would have been mismanaged. Here and there, you would have some of the fallbacks, but the system catered for and would have been able to address those. It is not happening in this case. And so I say that as an opening of the failure of the education system. Monday was a very important day for us in this country, our 59th independence anniversary. But I'm going to come to deal with some of the defects and deficiencies of the celebration of our 59th independence anniversary, starting from Friday of last week, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. But this is the point I want to make. There was an invitation advising district education officers, some are one and some are two in their appointments, to attend a methodology workshop at NSOR. You know, NSOR is a failed unit of the Ministry of Education. And we would have removed recently poorly managed to no management of what is happening at NSOR. But one night on this program, I would speak to you about how NSOR would have been established, why it would have been established, and some of the persons of great mind that manage and head NSOR. And so the district education officers who are responsible for secondary schools in these various regions would have been invited to a workshop, methodology workshop, that started Monday of this week, an important national celebration, our 59th independence anniversary. But that is not the point. The issue about this is that the issue about late and these district education officers, secondary, responsible for supervision of the secondary education program in these different regions, are now involved in the management and supervision of CSEC, meaning they are the persons who would traverse to examinations division in Georgetown, uplift examination papers for the particular week. Those would be like Region 2, Region 3, Region 4, Region 5, 6, 10. The other regions, there are other arrangements for those papers to meet in the region. And so these district education officers are the persons who would go to examination division, uplift those papers, take them to the various security places wherever they are, and be able on a daily basis based on the subject to be written to supervise the extraction of those papers from where that safe place is in that particular region. And so, as good, as bad as the ministry, listen to what I'm saying, as good, as bad as the ministry, they invited our secondary education officers to this workshop. Many of them are DEO 2 by appointment, which is one stage higher than DEO 1. So the first thing, you take them away from supervising CSEC. And so if there is any default in the management of it, then the Ministry of Education ought to be blamed. But Monday was a holiday. These people ought to be with their families or be celebrating or wanted to celebrate independence. But you took them away. An important point to note is that the person who they would have named, and on this program we will not call the name of the person, but that person is a district education officer 1. Can you imagine that the district education officer 1 is holding or coordinating a workshop for district education officers 2? If you go to the equivalent education officer 1, that is an interaction at the parallel level. But you go to 2. The 1 is supervising the 2. This is an indictment and an impasse, so to speak, on the Ministry of Education, on those DEO2s. The next point I want to make is that at this same workshop organized by INSOR, that they would have invited a few deputy head teachers. What an insult to not only our deputy head teachers, but more so our DOs, the 1 and 2 who are there, having that level of staff from schools to be there with them. And once we continue that practice, which is very discriminatory, so to speak, we would continue to insult levels of education officers in this country, levels of teachers in this country, and our system would not grow. But, you know, it would have been in a decline. And what they are good about is to celebrate a 1% and 2% pass. They call matriculation in mathematics and English and 5 subjects and what have you. All sorts of meaning to that. And 25 and 24 subject celebrations. But they are not telling you of the students or the learners at CSEC who are not able to matriculate with 5 subjects and more, mathematics and English A, grades 1 to 3. Let them give us that figure, that percentage of the learners that wrote CSEC in any year and could not have been able to achieve that level. They never said that in any of their reports. So that is an appendage to the workshop that we have at the NSWORD. And you know, I'm saying that we, because I am still part of education, because my profession is teaching. And I understand that good teachers are teachers for life. You know, many people say that they are teachers, but they went into a school one day, teach one day, and then they think they are teachers, but they are not as good as they are. So that is a point. So I want to talk about school grants, the second point. The first one was not any respect for our district education officers. School grants. You know, this program, the defects and the deficiencies in the list of learners at the different schools and in the different regions who are to and who were able to receive already the school's cash grants. You know, it was brought to the attention of this program from every single region across this country that in many schools that the regional education department officers were not able to verify all of the list of learners in the different schools at the different levels, nursery, primary, and secondary. It was further alleged that not only that these lists were not properly verified because it was bloated more than the number of learners in the school, the enrolled learners, but it was also brought to the attention of this program that at the time of the payment of these cash grants to schools, that there was a suspicion that because there was no name on those envelopes with that money that was there, and let me just remind, I want to remind all of our learners, all of our parents, all of our viewers, the chief education officer, the minister of education, the permanent secretary, and all the officers of the Ministry of Education, that every cent that would have been paid to all the learners, they are all state money. They are taxpayers' money. So let us straighten out that again. Lest we believe, or be fooled rather, that such money is coming from the PPP. It is not. It is state money. It is hard-earned taxpayers' money that we allow our learners to benefit from. And so that is an indictment. And there is need at this stage for the Auditor General, the Office of the Auditor General, the accountant general, the finance secretary to take note, because from these allegations and from these things that were put to us on this program, it might be safe to suggest that that level of defect and deficiency would warrant an investigation to be able to differentiate between learners that are legally enrolled and are there and a bloated list, the difference between the two. And some schools, allegedly, we can't recall them, may be held accountable and culpable for such a practice. And there's need for the Auditor General, the Accountant General, and the Finance Secretary. This is another point that was brought to our attention. And there are allegations that persons who are not learners at particular schools, but because they might be friends, families, and favorites, and more so the second one, families of head of these institutions, allegations are telling you that they were able to receive because these envelopes are not labeled with the names of persons. And so they receive and some signature took place. Because remember, you have a bloated list. And despite the fact, again, it was alleged that if you had a verified list of 25 learners of a particular school, legal number, but the bloated list gives you a total of 30, and because it was not verified, it was only reasonable that those who were in charge of making those envelopes possible in terms of the cash that is there would have prepared 30 envelopes, not knowing that the legal number of that particular school, I'm giving an example, would have been 25. So there are 5 floating envelopes. And so that 5 floating envelopes would have already been sent to the school or would have been presented to the school by the persons who would go there to deliver. And so what happens with that 5? And so there is where it is alleged that persons who are friends, families, and favorites are so allowed to benefit. If that was the case, and if it continues, then from that stage, because we are told, and it is alleged rather, that at a particular nursery school in South Esquibo, most of these things are happening. Then there is need for accountability. And if we are doing that allegedly at nursery school, then we are starting at that age to teach dishonesty to our learners at a very early stage, which is not the normal practice of the delivery of any curriculum or any program, whether nursery, primary, or secondary level. And dishonesty in its real meaning would lead you to corruption. Office of the Auditor General, Accountant General, Finance Secretary. There is a need for a thorough, not investigation, but auditing as it relates to verifying the list based on legal enrollment of these learning institutions. We cannot, we should not, and it is not good for us to be able to be dishonest, because we are passing that on to our learners. And in a true sense, our parents would one day speak it out. The next point we want to make is that there are a number of incomplete school buildings, and there are a number of school buildings with defects. Let us start now with a few schools that we are going to name. There are a number of schools in this country where contracts would have been signed since 2021 for the construction of new buildings, school buildings. And to this date in 2025, some of those schools are still to be completed, allegedly. And so contracts would have been signed 2021, 22, 23, 24, 25. Great thing about the Ministry of Education, the minister doing sod turning as though those schools never exist. So while the building is new, the school is not new in its real sense, because it was there, but it is now a new structure going in there. We want people to understand, viewers to understand, that when the Ministry of Education, the minister, the PS, the CEO tells you about a new school, it is new building. The school comprises of the system and the delivery of the program and our teachers and our parents and our learners. That is the school. But when you talk about a building, then it can only become new if something is being done based on that existing building that was there. So when you turn the sun, it is an insult to say that you are doing a new building. It is not in that case. And so, having made that point, we want to speak of the issue of Bamia Primary School in Region 10. Once upon a time, because of purposes best known to the then Minister of Education, Sheikh Baksh, thought that he was doing something that would cause me harm and that I would leave the work, because that was the aim of them. And I will tell you why he did that. One would have been for political reasons. And the second one was that when he was Minister of Education, and I was then the Regional Education Officer, Region 2, he tried to give me an instruction when the head teacher of a certain secondary school in this region made a decision based on indiscipline of a certain learner who it is alleged related to the then Minister Sheikh Baksh. I did not take the instruction because it was irregular and very unprofessional. And from that date, he ensured that if it was not he, his permanent secretary then, the CEO, the DCO in those days, targeted me to ensure that they find something. And so I was placed and transferred to Region 3. I made my decision, and eventually I was placed at Linden Technical Institute, transferred from Esquivo Technical Institute, because they wanted to try to punish me. I'm making a point because I'm coming to Bamia Primary. But what they didn't know, that Sheikh Baksh sent me into my own backyard. And I was received comfortably, was treated maximum as it relates to good treatment, excellent treatment by the people of Region 10, because they sent me to my backyard. And I was able to perform at maximum because I am a professional person. So they were playing on my mind, but I was greater than that. So I am saying Bamia Primary, which is allegedly 90% complete. I'm making reference to Bamia Primary because I worked in Linden as principal of the Linden Technical Institute for at least 8 to 9 years. And so the people of Linden is close to my heart. The education system in Linden is close to my heart. And when this is happening, it pains. The question is, when is Bamia Primary School going to be completed so that our learners can be comfortable? And I'm going to come later on to deal with some of the defects of the existing schools, not only Region 10, but across regions of this country based on feedback. I now go to another school, Husururu Secondary School, a secondary school in Region 1, which is about 60% completed. And the value of that school would have been $2.6 billion. But there are allegations and there are pictures and photographs to show that $2.6 billion that would have been allocated and contracted for that building, that secondary school in Region 1, 60% complete, and that project is completely abandoned. And that is why we want to say to our viewers, when they come to say to you that they love you, when they come to say to you that they are delivering education at maximum, when they come to you to say that they are spending billions of dollars in education, this is an example of a non-interest, one. Secondly, a waste of taxpayers' money, which is not good. But here comes the question again. How active is the Auditor General, the Accountant General, and the Finance Secretary, at least for now, in these two issues? They are incomplete secondary schools, primary schools, and nursery school buildings in Region 3, in Georgetown, and in Region 4. But on another program, we'd show you pictures of those incomplete school buildings. Because it is a waste of taxpayers' money. It is an insult to what education is all about. And so parents, viewers, teachers who are listening, you have to recognize that there is a waste of money. $2.6 billion Husururu Secondary School in Region 1, 60% completed and abandoned. That $2.6 billion could have been useful and usefully spent, meaningfully spent in the education system to deliver to our learners, to our teachers, adequate teaching materials, so that results that they boast about in a very true sense can hit the ceiling. We continue to hit results at the level of the floor, like a bumper ball bouncing, but cannot reach the maximum. But when you hear the talk about results, you would get the distinct impression that they are hitting the ceiling. They might be hitting the ceiling, as I said early on, with a 1% celebratory concept. But you are not telling the people, the learners, the parents, our teachers, what is the result of the 99%. So I make mention of these two incomplete schools, one incomplete, 90%, so to speak, allegedly, and the next one, 60%, Bamia Primary, 90% complete. The question is when the school would be properly handed over and open. The second one is the Husururu Secondary School, 60% complete at a value of $2.6 billion, abandoned, waste of taxpayers' money. And that is why we ask the question, or we say that education is poorly managed. You know, the Auditor General, the Office of the Auditor General, was very, very, very active during 2015 and part of 20. I would hope, based on these circumstances and in all of these situations, that the Office of the Auditor General would find it and make it their duty, as there in the Audit Act and the Constitution of this country, to account for every single cent that would have been appropriated by the National Assembly and the bill being ascertained to. There's time, and there's now the time for us to ask more questions about spending. The effects of schools and school compounds. The last time we talked about Friendship Secondary Information came to this program via the parents of that school. This program was reliably informed that some teachers of that school would have been targeted as giving this information to this program. I say, as I said the last time, I repeat, that no information came from any teacher of that school, but this program said to you at that time that once we would have made it known to the viewers that the teachers would be targeted, and we said that no information came from their teacher nor any teacher of the school, but concerned parents. The situation at that school remained the same. And across this country, in every region of this country, there are serious defects as it relates to all of our, most of our nursery, primary, and secondary schools. And we do not want to, on this program, to call the names of or mention the names of those schools, because we recognize that, having mentioned on the last program, Friendship Secondary School, the targeting that was there on our teachers. And we want to avoid our teachers being targeted. So we are not going to list the schools, but we are going to say to the viewers that included in these schools are these nursery, primary, and secondary school buildings that they call newly constructed buildings, renovated or rehabilitated buildings. In the worst case scenario. And these are some of the areas. In the different departments of education, the regional education officers or heads of departments of education, let me put it that way. The last time on this program, I said heads of Department of Education. One politically appointed regional education officer, and I'm coming to that regional education officer just now, because there's a flyer here that I have to talk about. Ask an officer to ask me, who is a head of Department of Education? But let me explain that. Maybe some of them don't know, and maybe the CEO doesn't know too, and his officers. The head of the Department of Education of any region, any district, education district. There are 11 education districts. Each region would have one, which with 10 regions would give you 10, and the 11th would be Georgetown as an education district. But in these 10 regions, we have regional education officers. And in Georgetown, you have a principal education officer. And I noticed every circular or piece of correspondence that would come from the office of the chief education officer, the deputy chief education officers, none of whom can make any impact on the education system, including the chief education officer, and some of those sleeping senior education officers and assistant chief education officers. They cannot construct a proper memo. They do not know what is the difference of concluding a memo and a letter. And they have a difficulty, all of them. And I give them the opportunity. The CEO can get in contact with me, and I do it for free for them for 1 week to teach them some principles of management of the education system and how to be able to construct pieces of correspondence, whether letters or memo. And so they can be very effective. They are not the CEO and none of the DCOs or ACOs and those sets of SEOs, the one at secondary, the one at exams, and all about the place that they are put in to put their people there. They cannot function. The DCO at exams, he's a waste of time. The DCO development, technical, he bunks around the place without knowing the technical education program. But let me come back to the defective schools. So we are not going to name these schools, but these are the defects, including them running to open some of these schools. Mind you, some of these schools that they are taking credit for, the contracts, if not the contracts, the money would have been allocated for the construction of those schools while the coalition was in government. So when they try to take credit for that, we are going to tell them where the money came from. These are the defects. Leaking roofs, poor ceiling, defective ceiling, unsafe floors, distressful stairways, electrical defects. And let me tell you something about electrical defects. If by chance there is a disaster by virtue of electrical defects, I hope, or this program would hope, that the rightful people would be held accountable. Sanitary facilities. Our teachers and our learners continue to use very defective in sanitary facilities. Our toilets. No, in some cases, no toilet that is running water to flush toilets. Our teachers and learners have to fetch water from either a canal nearby or a nearby pipe that is somewhere in the neighbor's yard. Drinking water, running water. And the cleaners are complaining because they do not have water to be able to clean our school buildings and facilities properly. And then there is this effect of I said the stairways and all of these things here. But there's an important one: the sanitary facilities and running water. Two important ones. And so, if by chance that parents of these schools that have defect, crack walls, broken furniture, inadequate furniture, all these things lead to a very distressful, distasteful learning environment for both of our teachers, for both our teachers and our learners. Some parents complain that despite the fact that in these nursery schools that tons and tons of money are allocated and are boastfully spoken about, that they still have to make meaningful contribution of certain items. Sometimes if you get that list, I have a list here, but the name of the nursery school is on it, so that I do not want it to be printed there, but there are 13 items here. This by itself cut across other regions. And if it does, then an important thing to do is for regional education officers or heads of departments of education to examine the system of allocation of funds or resources. So, and results would be an oriented result based on input. And so we need to examine the system as it relates to resources and as it relates to allocation. You know, when these schools are rehabilitated, new schools are being built, or schools are renovated, or repairs and maintenance work being done, there's always this miss rather, of an important document that gives the guidance. And that manual is the Manual of Non-Academic Standards. I asked the same Redo that sent to ask me the question about who is the head of the Department of Education, doesn't know. There exists in the Ministry of Education a manual that deals with non-academic standards. How shameful it is. And I might make an across-the-board allegation that the permanent secretary of the Ministry of Education, well, you notice I would have left out the Minister of Education because I don't know what she knows about the system. The permanent secretary, the CEO, and all the officers at Central Ministry, and all of these heads of departments of education, including their officers. If you go to their desk chance tomorrow. Brave head teachers, take a chance tomorrow. Walk in as a professional to your head of department education officer. Ask them, including the chief education officer, who they would have pitchforked there without doing anything about the system. Is a waste of time. CUs and SCUs. They are a waste of time and destroying the education system in this country. Ask them, challenge them to show you a copy of the non-academic standards, that manual. They would not be able to do that because they do not know it. How shameful are these officers? But they are shameless in the management of the education. I'm going to come back to later on in this program to deal with the laws of Guyana, chapter 3901, which deals the Education Act. Ask them how many of them would have a copy on their desk. Ask them about the 3-desk manual, section 1, 2, and 3. I can boastfully say about that. Let me let the viewers know. And so tell the Minister of Education, the PS, the CEO, and all the officers, I, Dennis Jaikran, would have been one of the persons who contributed to the construction of all 3 of those desk manual, section 1, 2, and 3, because I was then a cadet. And to say about it, I was I was in the first batch of cadet officers in this country. And that program that we did there was not watered down to what they have now at the nursery level, and then you put them out there as cadet officers and can't function. Simple things they don't do. So I said to you that I can boast that I was part of the writing of those 3-desk manual under the leadership of the late Dr. Una Paul, a former permanent secretary of the Ministry of Education, who coordinated the first cadet course in this country. But mind you, there were some persons who were pitchforked into that because they were far above the age group. They didn't have degrees, but they were trying to pass them through on a cadet course. One came, two, I think two or one came from region 2. Region 6 had some different regions, but I can't recall because I went on the cadet course a very long time. But I am cadet. I am a cadet. I can boast about that. I was among the first batch. But I'm going to tell you something about when I went to the interview, when the whole host of them came for the interview. When I said to them I had to leave for Esquivo, I'm not going to waste time here at the ministry. Quickly, you see, they sent for the minister, the then permanent. All of them are, the 2 of them are smelling the coffee now. They are smelling what you call daisy. They're smelling daisy now. Right? So I'm making the point that they do not know about this desk manual 1, section 1, 2, and 3. They do not know about 3901, Laws of Guyana, the Education Act. And so they are far removed from what is it that are required on their desk for the delivery of effective education and management of education in this system here. But that is what we have. Let me deal with administrative appointment. administrative appointments of senior personnel in school, meaning our senior staff, head teachers, deputy head teachers, senior master mistresses, heads of departments. The 4 levels, well, equivalent to that is senior master and heads of department. I wonder if the CEO knows that. That a senior master mistress equivalent to a head of department, whether mathematics, English, science, social studies, agricultural science, or whatever subject area they have there. Maybe he doesn't know. I said I'm volunteering to teach them for 1 week, the CEO, the minister, the PS, free of cost. I'm going to do a program for them. All these CEOs, the ACOs, the SEOs, teaching them how to deliver education in this country. I don't want any money from them, but I'm going to teach them. So I turn to administrative appointment. It is becoming sickening in this country. It is becoming irregular. And it is because it is becoming irregular and sickening, it is becoming irrelevant. And why irrelevant? To answer the question, is those persons who they would have selected for administrative appointments at the head teacher level, the deputy, senior master mistresses, and heads of department are all friends, families, and favorites of the PPP, none of whom at the time of their administrative appointment would have been able to fulfill the requirements for such an appointment. But the point to note is that administrative appointments are very discriminatory because there are no vacancies rather, that are advertised. There is no application to fill those vacancies. There is no shortlisting and interviews, as supposed to be the case. And then the appointments being made based on the points you would have received, based on the spreadsheet, the broadsheet that you call it, on the criteria that would have been set out on those sheets. But the criteria as set out on their sheet for administrative appointment is based on friends, families, and favorites. And if you would have betrayed our teachers at any particular time, the payback time. There's a particular secondary school, Abramsville Secondary School in Region 2, where both the head teacher and deputy head teacher would have been appointed administratively. And so when that head teacher was the deputy head teacher, the then Abramsville Secondary School was constructed, or would have been in construction stage. And so the board then, the school board, ensured that they forced the appointed head teacher not to go to that new school because the now regional education officer, who is a politically appointed person and has to be able to dance to the tune, and the person is dancing to the tune because there is political advertisement that she's doing in favor of the PPP. And she's a waste of time because she's the worst of regional education officers in this region. But I come back to Abramsville Secondary School. That school is now poorly managed. But let me give them good news. that the person who they force out of that position is in another country, very happy, very productive, and she's doing well. But that school would have fallen in its standard by leaps and bounds downward. That is a clear example of when you do administrative appointments, you do not put the right persons to manage. That school has a host of problems. By the way, the person who chairs that board has not a speck of understanding of what education is all about. And then in a short span of time, after the retirement of a failed head teacher of a secondary school, that retired head teacher was appointed administrator of that school. Another worst case scenario, destroying secondary education in this region and this country. But you don't hear about that. Every day in this region and across schools in this country, you have very high level of misdemeanor among our teachers and more so among our learners at the secondary. But you don't hear these things because they tend to cover up these things. So I make the point of what are the levels of administrative inability when these persons are appointed administratively. I'm going to come to deal on another program with some of them in Region 4 who jump and jump and jump, and they are at different schools now, and in Region 3, because those were the persons who betrayed our teachers when our teachers would have been on protest for increase in salaries, and they were only able to get 10%. Teachers, as I speak with you, you have an opportunity to open up your eyes now and see what is happening with you, what happened to you then. Because those who betrayed you are those who are benefiting from the system. One of them in a particular region is not only a head teacher, but is performing duties as a regional inspector. But the time would come when this program will know whether that person is receiving 2 salaries. That is not all. That particular person would have been identified to head NSORD. Well, that person is a failure. NSORD is a failure. So if you have failure plus failure, it is unclassified. That is the education system we talk about as it relates to administrative appointment. No normal course of duty or procedures being followed to appoint persons. But once you are able to do something that is irregular, unprofessional, the payback time would come for you. But the rewards would be great for you. But after those rewards, the disasters would come your way that you can't deal with it. That is happening in the system. That is happening in the system. Let me deal quickly. GTU elections are around, and I must remind you of the persons because your ballot papers are supposed to be out. And so, teachers, I want to remind you once you have not yet cast your vote, this program is imploring upon you because we already have for the president in waiting, the president elect is the Honorable Coretta McDonald, AAMP, and she's now General Secretary, soon to be President, because there is a no contest at that level. For first Vice President, this program is urgent. We do not have the pictures, the photographs tonight, but we are advising that the best person to support Comrade Coretta McDonald as first Vice President would be Andy Cameron. Second Vice President, Carl Vanir. Second Vice President, Carl Vanir. General Secretary, Collis Nicholson. General Secretary, Collis Nicholson. Deputy General Secretary, Heathcliff Peters. Deputy General Secretary, Heathcliff Peters. Treasurer, Raylene Phillips. Treasurer, Raylene Phillips. Regional Vice Presidents, one executable would be Thakurdeen Durga, Borbis, Mahalia McCalman, and Demerara Kishina Headley. And so those are the persons that from the teachers for this time around would be the best team to so manage this Guyana Teachers Union. So we now turn to some general matters and we talk about some of the, but before we go there, let me say to the viewers of this program, that we have in this country, and I'm going to call all of their names because I've been repeating it, a set of failed enforcement agencies that turn their eyes and backs upon illegal activities. And this program would have been making mention of a particular illegal and unauthorized mechanical workshop in a residential area causing noise, dust, and chemical pollution. The Environmental Protection Agency, under its act, is the rightful agency to address that issue. And that agency would have received at least 13 letters, none of which would have caused that agency, the executive director and all the staff of the Environmental Protection Agency, all of whom are servants of this country, who are paid by taxpayers, by state money, and are not functioning. Because across this country, every area like that and other areas, people continue to complain of the inactivism of the Environmental Protection Agency, the executive director and all the staff. But let me remind them that they are paid by state money, taxpayers' money, and to further remind them, they are servants of the people of this country and they are not masters over anybody. The EPA, the Ministry of Labor, would have failed to, in any way or in any form, cause to be applied to in that and other areas, aspects of the Occupational Health and Safety Act, an indictment. The NIS is a compromised institution, and there's always a lowering of assessment, like the Ghana Revenue Authority, and it's causing persons to contribute at very low levels while they are at the maximum in some cases of receiving. And then the next one is the Guyana Power and Light, another waste time agency receiving taxpayers' money, state money, and not functioning. This program would continue to highlight them of their failures so that people would be to know. And not all we are talking about, like how we say about all these, not all these policemen are rogue elements. There are selected rogue elements in this Guyana Police Force. But we're going to talk about Guyana Police Force next week. So some of these defects we want to talk about. But before I go there, let me just quickly, because at the end of this program, I have 5 minutes more. I want to do two things. Let me just, as I said early on in this program, let me just say something, give you a quote. And I quote, by endorsing a party widely accused of corruption, extrajudicial killing, money laundering, and the transfer of national wealth to a select few families, these people have revealed not a political shift, but a serious lapse in character. Opportunism may offer short-term rewards, but no one ever truly trusts. The history won't either. And this quote is from Randolph James. When I close, I would close with this quote because it is very important at this stage of our political history in this country. So I'm going to come back to that quote as I close. Well, let me wrap up. There are a number of things I wanted to wrap up here, but I would not get through with all of these. But I want to close by saying that two things. Let me quickly do. One, there are two flyers here. One here is saying that CSEC scholars online CSEC lessons registration open, and there are a number of subjects there, and the registration fee is $3,000, and there are monthly fees for CSEC subjects, maths or English A, $6,000, 6,500. CSEC maths and English A, $12,000. All other sub classes, meaning subjects, $5,000 each. And mind you, this is a person we understand that they would have put out this flyer who is a national coordinator, allegedly, for the mathematics program. So the question our head teachers, our education officers, parents are asking, what resources are being used from the Ministry of Education to do these lessons? One, that would have question put to this program. And the second question that would have put to this program, once these lessons are in place, what time would this coordinator have for the real work that the taxpayers of this country are paying this coordinator? And so the second, we want to say here that very inspiring and dynamic leader, which is a farce and a bad statement, or regional education officer, the name listed there. But this was the person who lately endorsed in a very sensible way for her purpose the president, and is now an authority of speaking to because we care grants. But this person is speaking out of third because this person doesn't know. And let me say, if this person is listening, or somebody would say to this person that one, this person as a regional education officer is a total failure. And the second thing is that this regional education officer would have been the one who would have betrayed that same head teacher I spoke about early on and other head teachers by going to their houses and taking letters for them to sign, not realizing that the education officer is delivering a letter on a date for Monday, but is going there on the Sunday. They don't think. But I'm going to deal with this here at a very public place later on. And so I want to close by saying that there were a number of defects as it relates to and efficiencies in the celebration of the 59th independence anniversary in this country. And so there was total desecration of our national flag. Some of these activities, when these flags were given, national flags, they were thrown on the ground, trampled upon. In some cases, buildings that are so located close to the army headquarters in this region, Region 2, near the fire station, not far from the police station, and they are passing there. All of our national flags are mounted upside down, left to right instead of right to left. But we can't get the pictures up because we are getting some technical difficulties in bringing up the pictures. And then our shame that when you fly your flag at half staff is an indication that someone, that is a mourning purpose, someone is dead. You know, this program would have been advised that a particular pastor in Region 2 is flying a flag at the home of that pastor at half, the national flag at half staff. And to crown it on, as they said to us in this program, that the church that this pastor is pastoring, that they are also flying the flag, the national flag, at half staff. Desecration of our national flag. And so all these jump up they have about this place, they are not patriotic. And there are pictures that we are not able to bring up where senior government officials, so-called businessmen, attending functions, including the prime minister of this country, a waste of time, big man, cannot be able to put themselves in place as how you should stand as it relates to the recitation of our national pledge and the singing of our national anthem. These are cause of concern. These are indictments on our national symbols. things of our nationhood, our national flag, our national anthem, our national flag. And none of these activities, that there was the hailing of any song of national, any of our national song. Indictment. We are celebrating 59th anniversary of our republic. Sorry, independence. And so, viewers, tonight, while time would have been the master of the control, we want to close by repeating the quote I just read a few minutes by endorsing a party widely accused of corruption, extrajudicial killing, money laundering, and the transfer of national wealth to a select few families. These people have revealed not only a political shift, but a serious lapse in character. Opportunism may offer short-term rewards, but no one ever truly trusts a turncoat, and history wouldn't either. And the person to whom this quote rather came from is Randolph James. Viewers, I want to thank you very much for tuning in, and I want to continue to advise you to submit to this program credible, verified information so that we can be able to formulate not only the topic, but to construct the content of this program so that a wider range of persons, viewers can benefit. We want to thank you. Good night, and may God bless you.